Hey y'all, you know who it is. I'm gonna go ahead and hopefully finish part three today. This is us continuing with part three. So here we go. May nodded obediently. May headed toward the kitchen. Hugo got up to follow her. Do me proud, Ty said. Of course, Hugo said. As he caught up with May, he heard the commotion now in the front and people coming in from the back. May passed the stove and jogged into a pantry area, which appeared to hold the different flavors of tea. Hugo watched and was about to follow when an officer came in behind him. The officer aimed his firearm at Hugo. Hugo quickly protected himself from the shots by raising slabs of the cobblestone floor. Afterward, he used them to push the officer out. Hugo went into the pantry and watched May slide behind a shelf of tea and drop. He followed her lead as he heard the officers blast through the slab of cobbled stone. Hugo and May dropped down onto a slide before they stood before a staircase. They descended down the short staircase and into a dark tunnel. Hugo rubbed his hands together and brought a small flame into them to light their way. Despite his training with his pyro energy, once in a while he still had to warm his hands up before he produced a flame. You're a pyroenergist, May said. My mother is one too. They traveled down the tunnel for a short while. When they reached the end of it, they climbed a short staircase. Hugo used his geoenergy to push through four stone slabs into a back road. He replaced the stone slabs in their positions. You're a geoenergist too? May asked. Hugo nodded. You're impressive, May said. Thanks, Hugo said. We'll head to Foo's house, May said. No, Hugo said. If he's been found out, that'll be the first place they look for you. Do you know another place we could go? Before May could answer him, she and Hugo heard screams. The sounds that followed were both disturbing and frightening. They jogged toward the main road and saw people running everywhere in panic. When Hugo and May saw what they were running from, Hugo saw that their panic was justified. Beasts were attacking the city and its inhabitants. They appeared as dragons, wolves, gargoyles, birds, and any other animal one could imagine or picture. Some were winged and some were not. Some were two-legged and others four-legged. Some were magnificent to behold, while others were terrifying. They weren't just rumors, May whispered to herself. Hugo heard her. We should go. In his head, he was freaking out. Really? Today was a day that needed beasts of various shapes and sizes to go on the attack? Jackson couldn't be behind this, could he? Hugo closed his eyes for a brief moment. He didn't want to think that Jackson could be responsible for this. The Jackson he knew wasn't a killer. Giving it a second thought, Hugo realized that was the point. The Jackson he had known wasn't a killer, wasn't an ice fire user, and wasn't a man who committed questionable actions. The Jackson he began to discover these days was a different Jackson altogether. Could he trust Mateo and Guinness's sister, the mother of his nephew, Teresa? May went back to the four slabs and pulled at them. I have to go back, May said, after Hugo jogged back to the hidden passage. I don't want to lose my grandfather. She dropped to her knees and worked at the slabs, but struggled with moving them. I'll need your help because, unlike my sister, my mother, and my father, I can't do anything. That's why my family fell into this horrible situation. I couldn't stop my sister. I couldn't stop or stand up to Kun Ling. Everything is my fault. May, Hugo said. She stopped trying to move the slabs and turned toward him. Hugo held out a hand. When she took it, he helped her from the ground. Don't talk like that. It gives me a headache. May got this hurt, offended look on her face. Don't look at me like that, Hugo said. I hate hearing negative talk. I have enough in my own head once in a while, and it drives me crazy. You can do something. You did. You asked for help. You'd be surprised how many people can't and won't do that. You're not afraid? May asked. Heck yeah, I'm afraid, Hugo said. Did you not see those beasts bigger than houses attacking and destroying the city? May chuckled. Despite that, Hugo said, we're going to go get your grandfather, and I'm going to get you two out of here. He wished he could do something for everyone in danger, but he knew he'd be in over his head in this situation. If Junior and Guinness were with him, he could see the three of them having a chance of being a big help. He wondered where they were. We have to save food, too, May said. Of course, Hugo said. Suddenly, he and May heard and saw shots fired from the stone slabs. We won't be going back through the tunnel. From where they stood, Hugo lifted a square platform from the ground and raised it high into the air. Show me where to go. I can see the tea house from here, May said. She pointed it out as a building with an elaborate green roof. It was one of the shorter buildings in the city. Hugo moved the platform in that direction, but a few moments later, a screeching bird-like beast came at them. May stood behind Hugo, and Hugo caused the earth from his platform to hold on to May and himself before he maneuvered it out of the beast's path. He moved them toward the ground, but a second, more reptilian beast jumped at them next. Hugo was about to dodge it, but the bird beast came after them. Hugo rubbed his hands together and produced giant flames to scare the beast off. Not only did they not scare the beast off, the beast was now a flying, flaming bird beast. Hugo sent his platform straight toward the ground. He and May needed to get out of the air. He wondered if it was because his fire wasn't hot or strong enough, or because it simply didn't affect these beasts. The beast that chased after May and Hugo became preoccupied with other prey, so Hugo and May hopped off their platform and ran the last couple of feet to the tea house. While they ran, Hugo couldn't help think about all the innocent people in this city. He wanted to help them, but he couldn't think of how he could manage it. What could he do to help these people without becoming so exhausted he couldn't protect May, her family, or himself? They stopped on the side of the tea house and looked through a window. Inside, they saw 3 officers watching over Fu, but Tai was nowhere in sight. Some of the officers came after them. Hugo thought, if Tai isn't here, Kun Ling probably took him as a hostage to get Mei or Zai Chen out of hiding. Hugo decided he'd have to take out the guards and get to Fu to ask him what happened. He had to do this before one of the beasts took out the tea house. He's not inside, Mei said. Yeah, Hugo said, I noticed too. But Fu might know where they took him. I'm going to take out the officers and we'll go in and ask them. You can't rush in there. They have Faison weapons. Don't worry, Hugo said. I wasn't going to rush in there. I can work from here. Watching through the window, he lifted 3 stone slabs from the floor and slammed them into the backs of the 3 surrounding officers. What are you doing? Hugo heard a voice ask behind him. Mei turned around. There are 4 of them. Hugo turned around as one of the officers came toward him with his Faison firearm drawn. Hugo scanned over the 4 opponents. After training with Junyo and Guinness, this would be easy. Getting shocked multiple times and having to pull ice shards out of his body really raised his game. Junyo and Guinness had agreed when it came to his training he had a talent for using his abilities in conjunction with his hand-to-hand combat skills. Because Hugo was so in tune with his geo-energy and growing more in tune with his pyro-energy, he could use them interchangeably without becoming easily exhausted. Combine that with his fighting skills, he could be confident without feeling arrogant. As long as he let go, Junyo and Guinness agreed he could defeat any opponent that wasn't naturally better than him. Therein lay the problem, but Junyo and Guinness understood. For Hugo, a fight meant defending himself, not punishing others. Neither agreed with this, but they understood it. Hugo took to the first officer. He turned into his inside, grabbed his gun arm, and pulled the gun from his hand while he threw him onto his back. He tossed the gun off to the side and used his geo-energy to restrain him to the ground. Keeping with his momentum, he faced his other opponents and lifted several stones to block a barrage of shots. At the same time, he lifted part of the ground behind the second officer and let it collapse on her, pinning her to the ground. With a leaping back kick, he took out the third officer and he pulled the ground from up under the fourth. He restrained the last two and put an end to that fight. Go you, May said with an added smile. Hugo had to smile in return. Let's get to Fu. She ran toward the back entrance. He followed her. Fu met them at the door. I saw you two through the window, Fu said. Ever thought of becoming an officer? He asked Hugo. No, Hugo said. They'd only slow me down. A short laugh escaped him. The truth was, like most people, officers didn't really trust the residents. Hugo didn't want to put himself in an environment with people who didn't trust or like him and had firearms. The thought made him smile to himself. Where's my grandfather? May asked, making them realize this wasn't the time. Follow me, Fu said. We should walk and talk. He's right, Hugo said after they heard an inhuman sound. He was sure Fu had meant to get away from the officers, but Hugo wanted to keep away from the beast that could eat them. Fu had his firearm in his hand at the ready. Kunling took Tai to the center of the city at the square, Fu said. We'll head there now. He led them through the alleys. She was sure you'd come back for him. They headed toward the square. Energist caught his eye. They were dressed in prison uniforms and fought against not only the beasts, but other officers too. They traveled toward the square, trying to stay out of all the conflict around them. Hugo couldn't help think both his geo and pyro energy were useless in this situation. The city is a mess, Hugo said, and she can only think of May. The prisoners escaping, the beast attacking, her life ruined, Fu said. Kunling blames May for everything. She falsely imprisoned innocent people. She didn't take precautions to secure the city, and her man apparently knew she was crazy and left, Hugo said, so she blames May. She broke down after she lost her husband, Fu said. Divorce isn't common here. It's disgraceful. It's dishonorable. She never recovered. This is too far, Hugo said. This isn't right. I need to talk some sense into her, May said. This isn't the time for this nonsense. People are suffering. Our city is under attack. If she wants to blame me and hurt me, that's fine. But I am not going to let her take down the city in the process. I'd rather hear you talk this way, Hugo said. May nodded in agreement. The three of them stopped before they ran into a fight between an elephant-like beast and a cryo-energist. Wielding his Phison firearm, Fu shot at the beast before it trampled the cryo-energist. People primarily use Phison energy to hurt energists and immobilize their abilities. But people could also use it as a deadly weapon against anyone or anything else. Fu drew its attention toward their direction, and Hugo and the cryo-energist immediately engulfed it in earth and ice. The cryo-energist threw up a hand in thanks before he went to assist others. Someone had called his name. Enlai. May made her move toward their destination, and Fu and Hugo followed her. They hadn't walked long before an officer appeared at their left with firearm in hand, aimed at them. Fu! The officer called him. What are you doing? Hugo used his geo-energy to grab hold of the officer's shoulders from behind and pull him and pin him to the ground. Don't have time for you, Hugo said. They hurried away from the scene, but May slowed down to speak with Fu. Have you heard any word on Zai Chen? May asked. She accomplished her goal, Fu said. She released the energist from prison. Other than that, all I know is thankfully some of those wrongfully detained prisoners decided to come back here to protect the city. Zai Chen might be with them. I don't believe I've ever said this, but thank you for being there for my family, May said. I wonder if Zai Chen realizes the great man she has waiting for her. While May and Fu chatted, Hugo thought about May and Kunling and May's desire to talk to her. At first, he thought that might help the situation, but the more he thought about it, the less he liked the idea. The three of them hid in a narrow, dark alley as a large horned beast came down their street. After it passed, and before they continued to move forward, Hugo stopped them to talk to May. I don't think you should talk with Kunling, Hugo said. Hugo, May said, this is something I strongly feel like I should do. It's been a long time coming. I hear what you're saying, Hugo said, but I saw the way she treated you in the alley. If she treated you that way and that was her calm, I'd hate to see how she would react to you now. If she blames you for everything, she slipped past rational thought. This is something I can do, May said. You don't need to prove anything, Hugo said. You asked me to protect you, and I want to make sure I do it. Let me do this, May said, and watch over me. Hugo sighed, but nodded his response. Hugo, Fu, and May continued toward the center of the city. As they traveled, they saw some officers protecting citizens from the beast's attacks, while others apprehended hostile energists and energists who were just trying to help. Hugo watched some of the beasts. These beasts wouldn't actively attack energists unless the energists initiated an attack first. It didn't make sense. Hugo and May could tell Fu wanted to assist his comrades, but felt torn because he wanted to assist May. We can make it the rest of the way ourselves, Hugo said. Fu stopped. They all did. I'm okay, Fu said. I'll lead you to the rest of the way. I know the city pretty well, May said. I'll get us there. Zai Chin wouldn't forgive me if I let something happen to you. Nothing's going to happen to her, Hugo said. Besides, May said, the city needs you more than I do. I want to tell you something, too. And you didn't hear this from me. You don't have to try so hard. You won her over a long time ago. This made Hugo smile. May hugged Fu and kissed him on the cheek. Be careful. I don't want you to get hurt or eaten. Fu smiled. A beast with a lion-like appearance slammed into the building above them. The beast and part of the building fell toward them. Hugo lifted the road from around them and covered them with it. He held it in place, letting it take the weight of everything that fell on it. He turned the road and let the beast and debris fall beside them. He settled the road back onto its proper place. You're not bad at all, Fu said before he nodded and set off. We're almost there, May said. She hurried, leading the way, and Hugo stayed at her side. She stopped them when they drew near their destination. All roads lead to the center of the city. In the distance, Hugo saw an older building, ancient in architecture and design, and the steps that led to its entrance. The magistrate of our city occupies that building, May said. He probably ordered Kunling to secure and protect the city. From their location, Hugo and May watched as many officers entered the building and emerged from it. Some took apprehended energists into the ancient building. Others took injured and wounded officers inside, as well as innocents. She instructed her officers to take care of the city while she herself disregarded his order, May said. They also saw a built officer holding on to Tai at the top of the steps, waiting. This is a trap, but Hugo couldn't figure out how it would be a trap. Kunling was nowhere in sight. She could be doing her job, trying to take down as many beasts as she came across, but she had Tai kidnapped to get her hands on May. She was close by. Kunling was trying to use May to get to Zai Chin to put an end to the chaos regarding the energists, who are both trying to save the city and get revenge on the officers. Did Kunling want May to try to bring order to the city? Or did Kunling really blame May for everything and want her punished in place of the energists and beasts? Hugo wanted the first option to be true. Based on what Tai had said about Kunling, he wanted it to be true, but was sure it wasn't. Alright guys, that was part 3 Tomorrow we're going to do part 4. Thanks for listening, and that's all for today. Adios.